Thanks, appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. It's a really gorgeous day. Parking hard to get because of the future Leicester City Fox team out here. You know, we could thank them for that. So I wanted to talk to you this morning about, first of all, well, I wanted to share with you an exhibition that I just opened of my own work, so that since you were kind enough to risk allowing me to view your work and have some opinion about it, I'd like you to have the same opportunity. Also notice that, or make note of the fact that you're not seeing real paintings here. You're seeing something on a screen coming through a piece of technology that had been interpreted by another piece of technology that had been photoshopped to try and find the right color back again, that got lost when this screen didn't, you know what I mean? So our experience of seeing work a lot anymore is through mediation of some kind. And unfortunately, our experience of experiencing is through mediation of some kind. And that's at the heart of what this work is about. There's an explanation sheet, or there's a statement on your chair there that kind of explains it. And before I start the PowerPoint, I want to talk a little bit about the process of making, how the project came about. And it started, I was at a residency, well, I'll go a little bit further back. I have a long history of plein air painting, going outdoors with my stuff on my back and painting, and just looking at things, looking at the world, and responding directly in paint. And I love that process, and I do it every year. It's not my only modality. I have a studio practice also. I invent things in the studio, totally fabricated. But the plein air work has informed my painting for the past 35 years, easily. I started doing plein air painting in 1981. So you do the math. That's 35 years ago, when I was living in Cyprus, just by off chance, by a strange coincidence. Got out of grad school, went to Cyprus with my new wife and to go on honeymoon, and we ended up staying there for 15 months, and I got to very effectively leave behind all of the stuff that I did in grad school and get it over with, and drop into a way of making work which I was completely unfamiliar with, which was painting from direct observation in the land. In 1981, it was a pretty hokey conceit to do that. Kind of a little bit embarrassing, to admit that you're a landscape painter, which has changed. Fortunately, now it's changed. But in 1981, post-minimalism and in the thick of what was considered the avant-garde at the time, pretty easily dismissed. But fortunately for me, I was not being witnessed. I was the only one painting. I was the only one witnessing. And the poetic power of paint itself and the experiencing of really showing up, which is what that way of working requires if you're going to get anywhere with it. Everything, it was like a perfect storm. And so I got caught by that, and I'm so grateful. Over the years, I have continued plein air painting, but I've also started to incorporate technology as a way of helping me to see what I see, using cameras. For a while there, I was using a 35 millimeter SLR, taking slides of the world around me, sandwiching slides together and creating invented landscape places that don't exist, but kind of do, because this is proof that this one existed and this is proof that this one existed, but when you put them together, you're somewhere else. And I liked that. I started using a handheld digital camera, video camera, shooting out the car window as I drove, because I wondered all the things that I missed, as I was going from home to the place I was going to paint. All this other stuff happened in between, and there's something there, and we take it all in peripherally, and we all do it because we're all in our cars all the time, right? But we don't stop to really breathe. We just, oh, cool, wow, you see that? It's like that. So I wanted to know the things that were there. The last body of work that I did with Elizabeth, or the last body of paintings that I did with at Elizabeth's was based on that sort of traveling and using the video camera and using my iPhone on camera mode, on video mode, and going back and putting it in the computer and looking at it and slowing things down and going back and forth and looking at things critically for composition, for color, for content, for surprises, for, you know, I don't even know what, just looking. And then recently, last year, I had the thought, well, all these places that I go by, I wonder if I can see them differently if I use Google Earth, you know, an interesting piece of technology that we all have at our fingertips. You know, we didn't have that not a long time ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it first showed up. And so I went and revisited sites that I'd already either gone to and set up my easel and painted in the face of. Like I'd go to Sovey Island, which is a place outside of Portland. If you can get there with your vehicle, you can get there on Google Earth, you know? And so I'd go to places where I had hours and hours of quietude and direct response to nature and watching things shift and change. But on Google Earth, it's different. You know, you're seeing things in a whole different way. So I made a body of work that I sent down to Santa Fe. I have a gallery in Santa Fe, and that exhibition was all based on traveling using Google Earth to places that I had already been to paint and remaking paintings from that perspective. In the fall of this past year, I was fortunate enough to get a residency at the UCross Foundation in Clermont, Wyoming. It was partly underwritten by the Ford Family Foundation, thank you. I have done a few residencies in my career, and they're always eye-opening, and this one was for the reason that I got a chance to really just focus my attention on this process of using Google Earth to go places. I asked friends, where should I go? You send me someplace, and we'll see what I see and see if what I see holds any interest or resonance with you. And so I did that. I made a whole bunch of paintings on paper, none of which, you know, were any great shakes, but the process got started there. And while I was there, I had the thought, I want to use this tool to go to Arles in France and see that little town, which everybody here who has any connection to painting at all will recognize the name of, because it's connected to somebody whose name we all recognize. You know what I mean? Like, who doesn't know Vincent van Gogh and don't know that he spent his time in Arles painting, and something of that story, some aspect of that story. And I thought, and he's a big hero of mine, or his work is, I just absolutely love it. And I thought, well, if I go to Arles and see Arles with these eyes that are not mine, but are a car with half a dozen cameras on it, what will it look like today? Are there paintings I can find? You know, will I only see it through the eyes of a painter who's already basically killed it for the rest of us? You know what I mean? And so I did that. And so the first slide that comes up here is an image made of Arles. And I'm explaining it ahead of time because the technology is not cooperating with us. So once we start the slide program, it's just going to go through its cycle. But I want to talk to you about when I dropped into Arles. I did it. If you've never worked with Google Earth, you have the opportunity to identify exactly where you want to go, or you have the opportunity to kind of wander around and be an unwitnessed visitor. And so what I did was I typed in Arles, France. I got to Arles, France. I took my little yellow figure that lets you go someplace specific. If you don't have an actual address, you can just drop that person in. And so I did it by chance. I just dropped him right in here. And I found myself in a back alley in Arles behind some really ugly houses that are cinder block construction with a broken down car in the overgrown lot with trash around. And really, it was kind of eye-opening. You know, it's sort of like this is really normal. You know, this is not that romantic. You know, this is not, it's not what we expect when we see a Van Gogh painting. You know, it translated into this personal vision with such pathos. And so, of course, I said, I'm going to paint that, and I did. And so this first painting is that. And while I was there, or while I was making this painting, is when the first bombings happened in Paris. And my original idea, which was pretty tender, I think, pretty sweet, you know, go to Arles and walk in the footsteps of some great painter and re-see it. Not a deep idea, but one I would be happy to pursue, was completely sabotaged and taken over by a different need, and that was to make the paintings that are in this show. It's explained in the sheet that's on your chair. I just hit the side button, or the space bar. And I'll just talk a little bit over, not address each particular painting so much directly, but let you witness. This is a very ordinary, uneventful place in Arles, a back alley. And I trusted Google Earth, and it looks like it is going to stick. That's nice, yeah.
At least this image.
At least this image. So now it's spacebar again, if I want to get going. Okay. And you could see that there's nothing that draws you to any particular thing. The subject matter is not this house or this tree or this anything in particular. It simply is very ordinary. And one of the things that I noticed about my traveling through Google Earth was the normalcy of everything, the ordinariness of everything, the common experience of everything, you know.
How long did it take you to paint that?
Well, are you counting the 30 years of practice ahead of time? Because the actual fact of making it from start to finish, a few weeks, I would say. Yeah. But I do believe a painting is an accrual of all those other paintings that you made. And so I traveled, I suppose I should have started this in Paris, because that was the next thing, but these are alphabetical, unfortunately. That's okay. So I traveled to places that have been visited recently in the last 10 years, many in the last 10 months, some in the last 2 months, and have been visited by unimaginable violent events, some of which are deeply political, some of which are unfortunately completely personal, with no less dire consequences, and some of which haven't yet been impacted directly, but may. Those places are as ordinary as Colorado Springs is, or as, you know, Puy-l'Évêque is as ordinary as Heston, Kansas was. You know, so these are partly about how do you choose a date in Jerusalem. This one happened last month, 2 months ago. And so the body of work is asking a viewer to, first of all, look at a painting and see it for what it is. Hopefully you see it as something that you don't mind resting your eyes on for a while. You see beauty, you see color and surface and stroke and texture and composition, and, you know, all the things we can break a painting down into. We even see potential meaning. We even can put ourselves into it. And then when you understand the relationship to what's happened in there, for most people, that's going to change how you look at that painting. For some people, it's going to make you not want to look at that painting, you know. And I want to remind myself, for one thing, I want to remind myself that, of course, we can't forget these things, you know. We also can't forget that as human beings, we have and as artists, I'll go even deeper than that. As artists, we have not only an opportunity, but in some ways an obligation to use the voice that we have to make sure we communicate more than entertaining things, more than decorative things, but to communicate things which make us think and make us and allow us to feel and perhaps to heal or grieve or celebrate.
Can I ask, what paint do you use? Oil?
They're oil paint, yeah, yeah. So you see Gabby Giffords is right below that blue blob right there. And, yeah.
So all of these were done from Google Earth, looking at Google Earth.
Yeah.
You knew places that you wanted to see and you just went to them and you said,
Absolutely. Yeah. So, for instance, in Tucson, Arizona, I mean, I'm wondering,
but you've done these, like, see, some of these events were a few years back, but you did this since.
all of these are done since November of 2015.
Yeah.
So you can see this is a relatively short period of time,
Right.
18 paintings. I had to build in drying time, so I stopped painting at the end of March. So in 5 months, in a 4.5 month span.
Right.
And the sad part is that I had to stop somewhere. I mean, there was no lack of subject matter, right? So the reality is that this, instead of 18 paintings, this could be 180 paintings. You know, this could have been, so. So anyway, if I just want to turn that off now, just hit escape and, yeah.
Just close the lid.
Close the lid. Cool. So I wanted to share with you, you know, sort of the work that I just made, obviously, but also show you that the way a painter works, the way I work, the reason that I'm still working after 35 years of doing this and haven't quit is that I never really know when I start, where I will end up. And that's, to me, encouraging rather than discouraging. Rather than daunting, rather than thinking like, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, so I think I'll just do something else until I get an inspiration. My approach has always been to get down to work, keep your eyes open, keep your heart open, be available, you know, tune your antenna, and it shows up. You know, and if it doesn't show up, if you don't exactly know still what you're doing, at least you're practicing your craft. You know, you're getting better at manipulating things. And when it does show up, you're practicing your poetry. You know, you're having something to say. You know, so anyway.
I'm curious how you chose the settings. You were looking at a lot of images.
I was,
in
yeah.
each of these communities, and then you settled on a particular place. So can you talk about that process?
Sure. So it's very much the same way that I decide where do I set up my easel when I'm out walking in the landscape, and that's a mercurial thing. Walking around, looking, what do I notice compositionally in terms of, you know, space, light, distance, air, color, activity, all the things, and then the response is pretty internal. I don't know that you can say exactly. I don't have a formula that I'm looking to fulfill ever, but I do know it when I see it. You know, so, and it's the same with Google Earth. You get in there, you drop around. You're driving the little car now. You go forward, you go backward, you turn a little left, you turn a little right, you look up, you look down. You can do all those things. And I'm doing all those things and watching the screen and noticing that's it. You know, it's an internal response. And just so you know, just because I said that's it doesn't mean it turns into a painting. My process with this process is I take a little screenshot, you know, I just do the Shift 4, you know, key, Command key, do a little screenshot, throw it into a folder, label it, Heston, Kansas, number 2, Heston, Kansas, number 75, you know, whatever it is. And once you've done that kind of traveling, you go get a couple of cocktails. No, you know, you don't do it all at the same time is what I mean by that expression. And you come back and you revisit and you look and say, what did I see? What, you know, what is the potential here? What, you know. And then you narrow it down. And in fact, I might take 2 or 3 things and make a compilation to make a composition really work. Never am I simply copying that thing. I mean, I'm editing out buildings and structures and cars and changing coloration and changing qualities of light. I mean, for instance, in this painting here, there's a whole parking lot full of cars. I didn't want to get lost in the morass of representing shiny metal objects and making us, you know, that was more information than the painting needed, than I needed to have represented. So I just get rid of them, you know. In the I don't know, I can't go back. In the painting of Colorado Springs, outside the Planned Parenthood Center, again, there were a lot of cars in the parking lot, but I wanted to have 1 car in there, you know, and so I painted them all out, put 1 car in there. It was a big, bright, sunny day, but I wanted it to be cool, and so I changed the coloration and made it really chilly. So, you know, I don't feel like I need to be that respectful of the photographs themselves, the images themselves. They're my tool, I'm not their tool, you know what I mean? So that's the work, and if you get up to Portland, the show's up until the end of May. I hope you get a chance to see it. If not, all the work is online at elizabethleach.com. And then, can we actually turn this off now? That'd be great. You want to run it again? Okay, sure, yeah. Yeah.
I've got little different eyes.
Sure, yeah, okay. My assistant said that.
Can I ask, how large are these?
They are, that's a great question. All of them are the same size. They're 23 inches by 35 inches, which is the proportion of...
Maybe like slightly smaller than what's actually on our screen.
Slightly smaller than that, yeah. They're probably about that tall by about that wide. And that proportion is the proportion of a 35 millimeter slide. And I wanted to make reference in that choice to how this is being viewed. Obviously, Google Earth is different, but the notion of we're seeing through a mediated experience, we're using a camera, we've got something between us and actually being there, and you know, and so that's sort of like a poetic nicety, just to remind us of how we're seeing the world with that. Yeah, great question. And I'm also not trying to direct your response. I don't want to make I don't want to say anything about the politics, take sides on any of it. You know, for instance, the Colorado Springs outside the Planned Parenthood. So obviously some people are going to think one thing about it and some people are going to think another thing about it. You know, I'm not in the business of telling you what to think. Just, I'm in the business of asking you to think.
Stephen, it seems to me that the pieces are so generous in that you're using erasure to almost create a space for the viewer between the titling of the work and the image of the work. What part does the viewer play in all of this and collective memory, and how does that, how do you see that getting played out in the gallery space?
Well, in the exhibition itself, I laid it out in such a way that there's very little interference between you and the seeing of the painting. The only thing that identifies what you're seeing is the name and a date. So for each painting, it just says Littleton, Colorado, 4/20/99. That's it. It doesn't have any other reference to it. And then on a wall, about the size of that, is a piece of paper about the size of this with this statement. A lot of people aren't reading the statement. Some people are. Those that are, you notice a body change. You see a a sea change in response. Those who aren't seem to be seeing beautiful paintings, or dismissing them, landscape paintings. I'm not interested in landscape painting, so I won't even look at them. I don't want to predict the response. I don't want to direct. Well, that's not true. I do want to direct the response because if you read both, you can't help that. But I would like to be as open to the possibility that a person would look at a painting and never really know what they're seeing and still come away with some experience of it, as that they would come away with this experience. I did a few things that were kind of tricky in the gallery exhibition. I had the Arles painting separated since it really wasn't part of the original concept. It was the first painting in the series, but it wasn't part of the original concept, so I physically separated it. It's on the wall as you enter the room, enter the gallery, and then you go through another portico to get into the main space. And I had the wall painted in a green screen green, a direct reference to this way of seeing through photoshopped, invented, what's real, what's not real, what's CGI, what's, you know what I mean? The painting itself is clearly very real. It's these aren't slick paintings. They're pretty, you can imagine doing this many paintings in a short period of time. There's a lot of roughness to them. But also that green, when you stare at that painting of Arles long enough, that green is impacting you, so that when you look away into the main space with all the other paintings, you're seeing a flash of red. It's just a physiological response that we can't help having. It's called a contrast of simultaneity, and our eyes seek the complement of whatever we're looking at. So you see this flash of red, and it opens up this room, and all these paintings exist in there. And so manipulative, yes. Poetic, I hope so. Yeah, Andrew.
So I'm not a visual artist, and therefore my mind goes in different directions. There are a couple of things that strike me, and I may just start with a question. How would it be different if you actually were physically in those locations? Or would it be the same?
It would not be the same, no. Especially since these are places that now have an identity that is an unavoidable, or an identity that you can't ignore. So if I go to Paris and set up my easel on the opposite corner from the Carillon Café, where I know a dozen people were murdered, that's there always. And people watching me and commenting to me is there always. I'm not saying it wouldn't be an excellent experience to have. It just would not be the same experience, And partly this removal through Google Earth, this ability to be safe at all times and unseen and anonymous, is part of how we go through the world now. And I'm not saying that's such a great thing, but it is part of what this is about.
Yeah, that's kind of the tension I'm feeling, is that the poignancy of what you've done is really incredibly powerful, but it's also this kind of uncomfortable thing, again, of how
Sure.
all of this technology is taking the place of reality, or is becoming the reality. So,
Right.
I think of like the GPS system, that's much more real than the landscape around the car.
Right. Exactly. And we're at that moment. We are in a moment, where we're less haptic than we have ever been. We rely less on our actual physical senses than we ever did for survival. Can you imagine? Not too long ago, you had to, what's that in the air? Like, what am I hearing? Is that a saber-toothed tiger? Holy crap! Time to run. You know what I mean? We were totally attuned to our environment and how it related to us as sensate beings, and we're less and less so now. We are seeing imagery of that all the time, but our actual experience of it is, has been abrogated. And
So I guess just a quick follow-up. So what kind of ambivalence or do you feel in the approach that you take? Or none? I'm not
well, well, that's I guess if I take that question to mean, am I okay with that? Are you asking me that?
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, because you've acknowledged the fact that in some ways this is a distancing or an alienating kind of experience, and yet you're making it very personal.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. Maybe this will speak to that a little bit. The ambivalence that I felt could be talked about just in describing my actual studio experience in making this body of work. Confusion at being excited about making paintings and dancing around and laughing and listening to music and making these paintings of these, getting into the paintings, and then remembering, oh shit, you're painting, what are you painting? Look at what you're painting. How can you be excited? How can you, you know what I mean? And then slapping yourself and getting all morose and then thinking, and yet, if I don't do it, we don't talk about this. And then excited about the fact that painting still has some potential to speak to us on a level that other things, just in a different way, that might speak to us in a way that actually facilitates conversation, that might facilitate action that, I can't know that, but if I don't make the paintings, I know that it won't do it, right? So it's like if you don't buy that lottery ticket, you're not going to win it. If you do buy it, you're not going to win it also. But, it's, at least you might, So, does that address that a little bit? Okay.
Great.
So, so I didn't really come here to talk about my work. I mean, I just wanted to share with you that I do work, that, so if you risked your own work at my judgment, know that, I wanted you to feel that, know that I also paint and know something of this process. And I also know something of the process of applying for things and not getting in. And when Andrew called me, or when Sandy wrote me and said, would you do this? And I think I replied within 2 minutes, I said, of course I'll do this, and they've expressed like, really? Really? Are you really? Like, of course I will. And, we all need to do these things. We all need to, we're in this together, right? And then when Andrew and I spoke and he said something about, people might like to know what it is, like, why didn't I get in? For lack of a better way to say it, paraphrasing. Like, what is it? Some people get in and some don't. How do you decide? What are the criteria? And it was perfect timing because I had just received my rejection letter from the Guggenheim Foundation, and then I just received my rejection letter from the Paula Krasner Foundation, my 6th and 5th consecutive, and I just received my rejection letter from the Gottlieb Foundation, my 3rd, I want to make sure that that doesn't mean the fact that I have all these beautiful rejections from these really great places doesn't mean that they're not going to give me another one. Or that one time, that letter's going to start off with the word congratulations, because I've received those too, not least significantly from the Ford Family Foundation. And that letter is a remarkable thing to receive. The thing is, I don't rely on those external affirmations for the work I make to tell me that I make good work. To tell me that it's worthwhile to spend my time doing it. So sorry, whenever I think about this, it gets me. Yeah, it's dispiriting to be rejected, but it's not, they say if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. It's kind of true, and it's not that big a deal. It's not really going to kill you, right? So you just continue to work. The process of jurying, we wanted to talk about this, and I think I'll open it up to questions in a second here, but I'll just let you know that truly these 401 1 entries in this exhibition really could have been a dozen really strong shows with very different sort of a sense of gestalt, you know. I chose the ones I chose for some reason, and I spent quite a lot of time, I mean, many, many days going over work, revisiting work, changing my mind, going back, including, excluding, reassessing, really trying to look at the thing on the little computer screen and try and figure out a way to really know what I'm seeing, reading everything that was written, looking how the writing related to the imagery, if it did, if it didn't, and tried to be very respectful of the process and each of the artists who submitted, and then just, you know, have to live with the consequences. That's it. So the works that were finally juried into the exhibition, I felt that it made a strong statement of excellence in craft, in personal artistic vision, in political content, in respectful of the space itself in some way, you know, how much room there is to deal with, and then just trust that I was able to read, again, through mediation, those images well enough to have made a good choice, you know, and go there. So, I don't know, do you have any questions or anything you want to, yeah?
Here's a question. We'll use your saber-toothed tiger as an example. I'm running away from a saber-toothed tiger and then he stops chasing me. Was it because I was so fast? He found something else to eat? You know, he fell off a cliff? There's all these different reasons. And I don't know whether it was me that saved myself or what. So when somebody gets rejected from a juried show, I have never seen it mentioned that your slides were awful, or oh my God, you were the next person we would have picked, or you know, it went back and forth, and you know, where you fall in that spectrum. And it can be very discouraging if you don't know what to improve, or what to change. Or is it, you know, this particular juror's eccentric opinion? You know, do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. So I can address a few of those really directly. Okay. If your slides were awful, that's always going to get you out of there.
But how do you find out?
And so it's the responsibility of the artist to make sure that their images are professionally made, are previewed by yourself on another computer if you're doing it on a computer, look on it on a few different screens, project it if you can. Just make the judgment that this represents me the best it possibly can.
Okay.
If you do trust that, then that's probably not one of the issues. But if you don't believe that, then I guarantee you that's a huge one. If a site gives you specifics on how to present a thing, if it says save this to 1920 by 1920 and at no more than 200 DPI and, you know, resolution, all the things, if it gives you specifics, follow them. A lot of places, I don't know that this place does it, but a lot of places, they actually look, did they follow the checklist? If there's anything off, anything at all, I'm sorry, you're out of here. Even if you're Van Gogh himself, you know, you're out of here. Because, I mean, for instance, I mentioned the Guggenheim, there were 5,000 plus applications for the 120, you know, so you got to winnow it down somehow, go, you know. That person didn't dot the I's and cross the T's, you know. As far as jurors' proclivities, I've heard of jurors who only jury in the things that are kind of like the work that they make. I don't ascribe to that, but it's possible, you know, and therefore that's one, you could simply look at what got in, what does that person's work look like, it looks just like their work, you know you're dealing with a stinky cheese, right? And so do you change your work to fit that? I doubt it, right? So other jurors are a little bit more Catholic in their tastes and are very willing to admit that there's something of merit in work which is completely unrelated to the work that they make themselves. And in general, you're going to have a better shot with that juror, you know, as long as you're making work which is authentic to you. So, and that's the other thing is, if you're trying to second guess what they want, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. It's really most important to be authentic.
And that's it.
Truthfully, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, because I have heard this and, you know, they'll say, this is the juror and this is their website. And you think, well, you know, you don't know where this person's coming from.
Yeah, you don't.
So in a sense, it means something, but it doesn't.
Right. So don't make assumptions, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
Don't assume that because they do this kind of work, that's all they're going to choose.
No, and I would think more often not, even though I've heard of exceptions, you know, maybe it's something, you see something, you go, ooh, this looks intriguing.
Well, you know, in fact, we could address the statement that's hanging on the wall in there. I gave you the numbers for a reason. You saw that there were 70% of the entries were painting, and 10% were photography. And you know what I would, but look at the inclusion. It's 25% painting and 25% photography. You know what I mean? The numbers, just the numbers that applied don't relate to the numbers that were selected.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Interesting.
It's really, if you have somebody who can just be in the process, you have a good shot, you know? And do great work. That's the other part. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering if you were surprised by any of the work when you saw it in person, as, you know, as opposed to.
I was pleasantly surprised by a bunch of it, actually. Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember all the names, but and I was surprised on the you know, kind of, and I'm also not going to mention any of those names. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by some of the work.
And one sort of little follow-up, framing.
Yeah.
I know when you're looking at a piece digitally, generally it doesn't include a frame.
Hmm.
And I know you don't frame your work.
That's not true always, but these are not framed. But it's not. Yeah. Yeah. Don't go spreading rumors, Sean.
Okay. Yeah, well, it was interesting. Okay, so seeing my piece in context with the others and mine's framed, it made me look at it differently
Yeah.
and question the framing. And I know when you're looking at them, you're not seeing framing.
Exactly.
Photography.
Exactly.
And I don't know. I don't know if you have any little thoughts about that.
Well, I do. In a show of this nature, where you have the work of 20 or 30 different people, it's a pretty much a guarantee that it's going to feel a little bit hodgepodge, somewhat, you know, unless the exhibiting institution takes the responsibility totally for presentation. You know, could you build that into your budget next time, Andrew? Thanks, like all the framing and everything. You know, for a sense of uniformity and that kind of stuff. It's just, you just expect that. But again, like your question, do an excellent job of it. You know, mats are clean, plexiglass is not scratched, corners meet, you know, those kinds of things. Those are all things that I would just expect. Yeah.
Is there a boundary between being a juror and a curator?
Is there a line in there? Are they the same thing or different? Yeah, definitely. They're different, but so to my eye, a curator has an idea for a show and says, I know what I want this to look like, and either submits an open call and is a little bit clear about, I'm looking for this. So if I'm looking for photography about elephants, don't submit your painting about dogs, you know? I mean, just don't do it. And from all of the 500 photographs of elephants, I'm going to select the show that I want to do, right? So that's curating a show as a competition. More pure curation, I know the work of this person, I want to get that person. I know that person, I'm going to get that person. I know this work, I'm going to build this show, and that's that, you know. That's the eye of the curator. The work is obviously made by the artist, but the curator's eye comes into play. And you do it for a lot of different reasons, because there's a statement that can be made by associating this work and that work, you know, by collecting these things in the same place so that we can give them our attention collectively at a moment. And it helps us to see things that we might not have otherwise seen. And we certainly might not see if that's an isolated incident, you know. The jurying is a different process. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit, you know, as I used to tell my daughter when she was in preschool. But you still have to use your eye, you know. You're still making judgment about what might work together or what you might be saying with this, or yeah.
Did you jury or select the winners? You know, I know that you said don't want to use first place, second place, but you know, those sort of award-winning pieces in person?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I didn't rely on the computer to look at them. I came here an hour and a half early and spent 45 minutes in the room by myself, looking at everything, and maybe even longer. I don't know, was it? Yeah, about an hour. And made short list, and then shortened that short list, and then finally decided which were, and then had to rank them because you're ranking them. Yeah, yeah. I didn't feel any was. I mean, that's a
You
tough.
did that specifically because to lose that mediation of the screen.
Oh, absolutely, and in fact, and to the credit of the Arts Association, that's a requirement. You know, you're not jurying those at a distance. And I agree with it 100%. Yeah. Yeah, most of us experience looking at art in magazines and books and online, whatever, and we think we know what we're seeing, and we don't. You know, it's a simulacrum of a thing. It might titillate us enough to go and look at it, or it might convince us that we know what we're looking at. And that's the part that's dangerous. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, I mean, it's easy to apply to things through the cafe system, and I love that ease of it, but it's also not the most honest way to look, you know what I mean? Or that's maybe honest is the wrong word, but you're not exactly looking at what that thing is. So you have to trust that the viewers are experienced enough at actually looking at work and seeing work translated through mediation to know what kind of slop there is, you know, to know how possibly accurate or inaccurate it is. And then, from my experience, that's when the supporting writing really matters. So if I see a thing that's, you know, kind of, we talked about this last night, you know, if it just says, you know, I think blue is really cool, and so I only use blue, bam, you know, that statement isn't going to convince me the same way another statement about blue might convince me, you know, that I equate blue with these feelings or this meaning. This artist taught me something about the possibility of blue. You know what I mean? You reveal a little bit more of your thinking that way, and sometimes it's useful, you know, when you're not quite sure what you're looking at.
So along those lines, and kind of hit on a few different points on sort of the process of this jurying and winnowing down the field. So you start out with 400 submissions, and you make an initial pick, and then you start refining, I would imagine, criteria as to, okay, well, what's going to differentiate now as we get closer?
Mm-hmm.
Can you
sure,
You get a magical, oh, that's a hit right there.
Sure.
Okay. And then, but now you have to start saying, and you mentioned already.
Well,
Maybe run us through
I'll tell you, in reality, some of it is bad photographs, not well represented work. Basically, because you can't trust them anyway, why trust a bad one over a good one? You know what I mean? So essentially, get those out of there, and I did a lot. And then when you start to notice that there are, 30 of the same kind of thing, and they're not distinguishable one from another really, you start to question, well, what's the merit in that right now? How does that teach me something when there's clearly a lot of sort of staying on this one plane without leaping. So if you can notice a leap, you can notice 30 things that are similar by 8, 10, 12 different people, but one of them took that and did something somehow. I'm not sure, exactly what it is, but it becomes evident. You see it, There's I don't want to say there's a lot of that you rely on your feeling exactly, but on some level you do. You rely on your ability to recognize when a thing has separated itself. And that's the same experience in the studio. When you're painting, when you're making, how do you know when you've made something worthwhile or not? You're the first person that has to answer that question, right? Always, it's your responsibility. So you're relying a certain amount on intuition, on experience, on je ne sais quoi, like, what is that? I don't know what it is. Maybe in some ways, that's how we make our best leaps, when we don't know what it is, but we know that it is, Oftentimes, I think when we know exactly what it is, we've kind of gone into the realm of simple reportage or illustration of an idea, or something which can be excellent on one level and not so engaging on another. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, close enough.
Okay. Hey.
Stephen, would you have some more advice? You go into a little bit more about the writing component, and maybe how you approach when you're applying for a show or support, how you go about writing your art statement and thinking through that, and do you have other people read it or provide feedback? And any advice
Sure.
you have?
Yeah. Definitely, I definitely have it read, have my writing read by other people whose opinions I respect. I don't have them read necessarily for spelling and grammar and that kind of stuff. But I find that it's really easy to get kind of caught up in repeating yourself an idea over and over again, and that's not that useful. The more you can kind of streamline your writing, the better it is, the more clear you can be. Use those 2-syllable words we were talking about instead of 5, like you don't need to, it doesn't need to be really fancy, it just needs to be understandable and clear. Pay attention to limits on space. If an application says 500 characters or less, keep it to 500 characters or less. Don't have it end, bam, because you ran out of room. But also don't feel that you need to put in 500 characters. If you can clearly explain whatever it is you're trying to explain in 4 sentences, and you still have 400 characters left, great, As somebody who's read a lot of these, I often appreciate that, It's like, I didn't need to read the same thing said over and over and over again in the same statement. Again, speaking authentically rather than what you think somebody wants to hear is always advised. Always speak from your own intention, your own heart, your own experience. And I think writing poetically, while it can be beautiful, is not the place for this kind of work. Sort of being too poetic in your writing, too florid, works against you. generally. Being more clear is to your advantage. There's plenty of room for the poetry for your references to wax, poetic on you all over the place. You yourself, no need to do that.
So Stephen's been up for about an hour.
Okay?
Are there any final questions here?
Yeah.
I'm curious how, or if your role as professor of art informs your jurying,
Mhm.
and vice versa, as well as, you've spoken about you being the artist, how that can inform just the seriousness of how you do the process,
Mhm.
all that other sort of stuff. And I'm curious about those other two, that other role in your life, the teaching part.
Well, do you want to change the tape?
Nope.
Okay. The teaching part, I teach foundation drawing, design, generally beginning classes. So I'm not working with people who are artists themselves yet. And so I try and make sure not to squash any kind of enthusiasm for going a little bit further in this field, because it takes a while to get over. Most of us starting out are pretty timid about revealing anything about ourselves or exposing ourselves, making ourselves vulnerable in front of others, or and that includes. My dad used to describe his drawing ability as I couldn't. He used to tell me, I can't imagine where you got all your talent. I could never draw an apple with a ruler. So to me, that speaks about you've already shut yourself down saying that you can't do a thing. So my job in teaching is always to begin to open the eyes that of course you can do a thing. You do a thing the way you do a thing, and I can help you to grow that. That's kind of how I approach it, if that helps or answers.